The Hungry Beach. In the sand, the setup is simple, a beach party. But by sunrise, half the group is just gone. There are no footprints leading anywhere, no blood spread across the beach, no signs of a struggle. But they realize one thing. Anyone who didn't fall asleep directly on the sand survived. A couple in a lifeguard tower, a couple inside a parked car with a friend, and a guy crammed inside a trash barrel. The crucial clue lies in the events from the night before. The friends had found an empty shell in the sand. Whatever was inside that egg got onto the beach and now lives beneath the surface, violently sucking down anyone who touches the sand. With no cell phones, because someone stuffed them all into a lost bag. The desperate survival game begins. They run improvised tests using hot dogs. Wherever the sand sinks and devours the food means certain death, but where it doesn't react might be a safe route. One of them tries to be a hero by jumping between the structures, but he slips and his stomach touches the sand, and it severely burns him. Finally, after a while, the beach lifeguard arrives in an official vehicle, but he ends up touching the sand with his bare hand, and the beach violently pulls him under in a very questionable CGI effect. Another guy gets the idea to grab the cop's shoes, but he loses his balance and falls straight into the sand. The mysterious creature, visibly stronger now, pierces through the bottom of the barrel and drags the big guy who was trapped inside under the sand, with bluish tentacles punching through the wood. It becomes completely clear, the more it feeds, the stronger, bigger, and faster it gets. Finally, the two survivors manage to reach the car with Jonah, but suddenly the one with the burned stomach slips and ends up outside the vehicle. She's forced to face the monster's tentacles and improvises fire as a last weapon. The flames make the creature retreat, burning beneath the surface. It's the first time it shows weakness. The trio collapses inside the car, exhausted. When the sun fully rises, only two are still breathing. Suddenly, a barefoot man appears on the sand, calling out to them, and surprisingly, nothing happens to him. They step out of the car, still scared, but with a temporary and confused sense of relief.
Hey, bud.
The Killer Grinch. In the mean one, what should be a simple Christmas parody of the Grinch turns into a bloody slasher. The story revolves around Cindy You-Know-Who has carried since childhood the memory of a night that destroyed her family. On Christmas Eve, a green creature broke into her house and murdered her mother right in front of her eyes. From that moment on, Christmas is officially banned in Newville. The entire town treats the holiday as something cursed, burying any celebration to avoid awakening whatever lives in the mountain. 20 years later, Cindy returns as an adult, marked by trauma and determined to face the past. Her emotionally devastated father lives isolated, repeating that some things should remain forgotten. When he tries to bring back the Christmas spirit, the worst happens. The crime is treated as an animal attack, but the pattern is too clear to be coincidence. Determined to prove the monster is real, Cindy seeks out Doc Zeus, a man who also lost someone to the same entity. He gathers evidence collected over the years, ignored reports, tracks in the snow, blurry photos of a green silhouette in the mountain forests. The movie then shifts tone. From traumatized victim, Cindy takes on the role of hunter. She turns Christmas symbols into weapons, subverts the festive aesthetic, and transforms it into an arsenal. The confrontation happens in the forest and ends in the house where it all began. During the final clash, Cindy discovers something that completely changes how we see the creature. She recognizes a necklace she had given him as a child. That detail suggests the horror may have much more complex roots than just a simple supernatural killer. When Cindy chooses forgiveness instead of execution, the ending subverts the original tale itself.
I forgive you.
The creature's heart grows, but here instead of sweet redemption, there's a literal explosion. The next day, the town finally breaks the cycle of fear. Christmas returns to Newville. The Killer Donut. Attack of the Killer Donuts begins in a typical American town where daily life revolves around dandy donuts. Johnny works his usual shift behind the counter alongside Michelle, his childhood friend, until chaos literally drops into the fryer. Uncle Luther, the family's crazy scientist, shows up at the shop in a panic trying to recover a forgotten tablet. During a scuffle with the shop owner, a vial of experimental reanimation serum flies out of Luther's pocket and falls straight into the bubbling fryer oil. Quietly, without anyone noticing, that day's batch gets a very different seasoning. The first victim is a regular customer who takes a box home. Meanwhile, two cops buy a dozen and offer one of the donuts to a handcuffed prisoner in the patrol car. Minutes later, the consequences begin to show. Even the owner of a rival restaurant takes a donut home and is brutally attacked in his own shower by the killer pastries. Meanwhile, Johnny and Michelle are dealing with more normal problems. When 3 bullies harass Michelle in the diner, Johnny steps in and both of them end up fired by the furious owner. At the same time, Killer Donuts donuts are all over town, even building their own army. On the street, Johnny, Michelle, and their friend Howard run into the contaminated prisoner. What happens next is one of the most absurd moments in the movie. And if you thought it was unfair that the bullies got Johnny and Michelle fired, don't worry. The donuts get revenge for us. Shortly after, Johnny, Michelle, and Howard run into them and immediately realize who or what was responsible for the massacre. Then we're treated to another wonderful scene: humans versus donuts. Our superheroes manage to survive the big threat, but end up arrested by the police while the donuts escape in a patrol car. No, you didn't hear that wrong. The donuts steal the patrol car. With no other options, the group seeks out Luther, who quickly develops an experimental anti-serum. Armed with homemade equipment, they return to Dandy Donuts, now completely overrun by dozens of killer pastries. The police arrive too late to contain the situation. Howard heroically sacrifices himself to distract the swarm, while Johnny and Michelle lock themselves in the storage room and finally realize the only possible solution. They can't save the diner. They can only blow it up completely. Johnny and Michelle escape through the underground sewers. In the end, among the smoking rubble and resolved chaos, Johnny and Michelle decide it's finally the right moment to admit the obvious feelings they've always had. The killer pants. In Slacks, horror is born in the heart of a store called CCC. The brand is about to launch its most anticipated product, the Super Shaper jeans, a supposedly revolutionary piece that promises to perfectly shape the body. Libby, a young girl obsessed with the brand since she was 16, finally fulfills her dream of working there. The company's internal rule is clear: all employees must wear the new collection themselves, serving as living models for the brand. Everything seems perfect, but on inventory night, with the doors locked and only the staff inside the store, something starts to go wrong. Gemma, a veteran employee, decides to try on the jeans before the official launch. At first, they perfectly shape her body, but then something absolutely impossible happens. The pants tighten more and more and simply won't come off. With every desperate movement Gemma makes, the jeans squeeze even tighter, crushing her waist with supernatural force. Meanwhile, on the main sales floor, designer Harold enthusiastically sells the miracle of premium Indian cotton to the gathered team. No one hears the terrified screams coming from the bathroom. Only the rehearsed applause from the corporate presentation. Craig, the store's ambitious manager, is desperate for a promotion and literally decides to sweep the crime under the rug. While he tries to maintain control and pretend nothing happened, another employee tries on the jeans and enters an almost hypnotic state. She dances uncontrollably until she suffers a fatal accident. In the back stockroom, an employee loses fingers, hands, and finally his own head. The jeans make a sound that almost resembles an animal growl before jumping in search of the next victim. Peyton, a famous digital influencer, arrives at the store to do an exclusive live stream of the launch. On camera, she praises the cut, the fit, and the sustainable design. Within seconds, the pant legs wrap around her neck and snap her spine in front of the online audience. And 4 red slashes appear on the brand's logo. After regaining consciousness from being knocked out by Craig, Libby finds a revealing recording. Shruti, another employee, dances to traditional Indian music, and the jeans move in perfect sync. So she decides to confront the garment. In a surreal scene, the pants use a hand to write in blood on the wall. The brutal truth finally comes out. The premium cotton was produced with child labor. A 13-year-old girl, Karate, died in an industrial machine, and her blood stained the fabric. That's why the Super Shaper carries her spirit. Libby and Shruti immediately promise to expose the full truth about CCC and its corporate crimes. But Craig, more concerned about the brand than human lives, reacts violently. He murders Shruti on camera, believing he has destroyed the evidence. But he didn't realize the memory card disappeared. And when Craig tries to silence Libby forever, an entire troop of Super Shaper jeans, now worn by the store mannequins, devours him completely until only bones remain. The store's lockdown finally ends and the doors open to the eager public. Libby desperately runs to the entrance, begging and screaming for no one to go inside. But customers obsessed with consumption literally trample her, running over her in search of a pair of jeans on sale. Inside, the Killer Jeans army begins another massacre. The Killer Snowman. Jack Frost is a serial killer about to receive the lethal injection when the prison transport van crashes into a truck carrying an experimental chemical. The truck explodes and the substance spills all over the criminal's body. Minutes later, something impossible rises from the snow. In the small town of Snowmountain, Sheriff Sam Tyler tries to live a quiet life with his wife Anne and their son Ryan. But wherever a freshly built snowman appears in someone's yard, brutal deaths follow soon after. The first warning sign comes when Billy, a local bully, destroys a snowman in the Tyler's yard. Not long after, he suffers a grotesque accident that ends in The killing spree continues. Townspeople attacked inside their homes, Christmas decorations turned into execution tools. Panic spreads through the town. Local police call in federal agents, Manners and Scientist Stone, who prefer to keep everything top secret to avoid mass hysteria. When they realize that regular bullets have no effect, because Jack simply turns into water and instantly refreezes, Sam and the federal agents lure the creature to the police station and try to destroy it with high-powered explosives. Even a collective attempt to melt him in the town furnace fails when he escapes as steam. The pattern changes when Ryan remembers what seems like a random detail. A batch of oatmeal made days earlier contained chemical antifreeze. The substance prevents freezing, and it works. Sam strategically lures Jack outside the station, throws himself at him through a window, and they both land directly in the back of a pickup truck filled with liquid antifreeze. In contact with the liquid, the snowman's body begins to fall apart. The ice turns into a thick green sludge until it almost completely disappears. The town carefully bottles the antifreeze mixed with Jack's liquid remains and buries the sealed containers like coffins in an improvised cemetery. Blood and Honey. In Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, Christopher Robin grows up and abandons the 100-acre wood. Pooh, Piglet, and the other inhabitants are left behind. Without food or care during a harsh winter, the group collapses. Hunger leads to the unthinkable. Eeyore is sacrificed and eaten. From that moment on, Pooh and Piglet give up any trace of humanity. They make a silent pact to never speak the language of men again and begin to nurture deep hatred toward Christopher. Years later, the boy, now an adult, finally returns to the woods with his fiancée, nostalgically hoping to introduce her to his childhood friends. The cabin is completely degraded, with disturbing drawings and threatening messages covering the walls. From the forest shadows, Piglet emerges holding chains. The fiancé is murdered, and Pooh drags Christopher into captivity, completely indifferent to his desperate pleas for forgiveness. At the same time, a group of young women arrives at a house near the woods for an isolated weekend getaway. One of them confiscates everyone's phones under the excuse of disconnecting, eliminating any chance of calling for help. The sixth friend, traveling alone to join the group, gets lost on the dark road and runs into Pooh. The massacre begins gradually. One victim is attacked in a jacuzzi, another is brutally executed simply as a show of force. Pooh and Piglet don't act like irrational animals. They use vehicles, improvised weapons, and intimidation tactics. In captivity, Christopher witnesses the result of his abandonment, creatures that survived starvation and turned trauma into violence. The girls manage to free Christopher and an unknown woman who had been held prisoner. She swears revenge and pulls out a gun, only to realize too late that it's out of bullets. She dies moments later. One of the girls repeatedly strikes Piglet with a sledgehammer and finally kills him, but Pooh hears her victory scream and quickly returns, eliminating the survivor and resuming the hunt. On the road, 4 men encounter Maria and her friend running in desperation. Pooh faces all 4 alone and brutally massacres them one by one, using whatever object he can as a weapon. The girls grab a pickup truck and run Pooh over, but he clings to the truck bed, causes a violent crash, rips Maria's friend's head, and moves in to kill the protagonist. When everything seems lost, Christopher appears in a car and violently pins Pooh between 2 vehicles, desperately trying to save Maria. But Pooh stands up again. He grabs Maria while Christopher begs to die in her place. The bear stares directly at Christopher and, breaking his own vow of silence, finally speaks the only line in the entire movie, and then executes Maria in front of Christopher's horrified eyes. The Dinosaur Priest. In The Velocipastor, horror isn't born from fear, but from complete absurdity. The movie embraces its low budget from the very first minute and turns its technical limitations into part of the humor itself. It all begins in a nearly empty church. Young priest Doug Jones finishes his sermon to just 3 parishioners. Seconds later, an explosion hits his parents' car outside. The low-budget production doesn't even try to hide it, that label on the screen. The tragedy becomes the trigger for an improvised spiritual journey. Destroyed by guilt and grief, Doug decides to travel to China in search of purpose, which in reality is just an ordinary forest pretending to be exotic. There, he meets a dying archer who hands him a claw-shaped artifact. When he cuts himself with it, he activates an ancient curse. That same night, back in the United States, Doug transforms. The movie's premise reveals itself right there: a priest who turns into a dinosaur to fight crime. In his first transformation, he kills a mugger and saves Carol, a prostitute studying pre-med and law. Completely naturally, she accepts the fact that a priest dinosaur just saved her. The next morning, Doug thinks it was all a nightmare, until Carol confirms it wasn't. While trying to maintain his religious routine, he hears the confession of Frankie Mermaid, a local pimp who admits he was responsible for the explosion that killed Doug's parents, and he can't help himself. From that point on, the plot abandons any traditional logic and fully embraces chaos. Father Stewart, Doug's mentor, tries to solve the Jurassic problem with an exorcism. The ritual goes wrong and results in another violent outburst. That's when the central threat appears: Christian ninjas led by Wei Chan. Their plan is absurd: flood the city with cheap cocaine, cut off the supply, and force addicts to seek salvation in the church. An evangelization strategy based on chemical withdrawal. When Father Stewart tries to confront them, he's executed with an explosive arrow. From that moment on, the film turns into a revenge story. Now it's just Doug and Carol facing the threat alone. Carol fights several enemies in direct combat, while Doug, fully transformed into a velociraptor, eliminates the rest in scenes filled with obviously fake blood and exaggerated choreography. The final confrontation with Wei Chan ends in multiple dismemberments and a caricature-style decapitation. Carol appears to die during the battle, but miraculously survives in the hospital. In the end, Doug accepts his impossible condition. He doesn't stop being a priest, but he also doesn't stop being a dinosaur.